Did Moses write the Pentateuch? Abraham ibn Ezra, who lived 1089 to 1164, a renowned medieval Jewish scholar and commentator, identified certain passages in the Pentateuch that he believed were not authored by Moses. Was he a forerunner of the documentary hypothesis? Joel Baden says in his book, The Composition of the Pentateuch, on page 13. Of particular note is the great medieval commentator Abraham ibn Ezra, who identified, in addition to the entire last chapter of Deuteronomy, a few other verses that he thought it improbable, if not impossible, for Moses to have written. The book, Who Wrote the Bible, from Richard Elliot Friedman, says on page 19. But, ironically, Ibn Ezra himself included several enigmatic comments in his own writings that hint that he had doubts of his own. He alluded to several biblical passages that appeared not to be from Moses' own hand. What are the arguments of Ibn Ezra? The first on the Canaanites were then in the land. The text is taken from Genesis chapter 12 verse 6. Some argue that the reference to the Canaanites suggests the text was written at a later time, after the Canaanites were no longer present in the land. Therefore, it is proposed that this verse may have been added by an editor or redactor at a later period. Let's examine the context in which the phrase, "and the Canaanites were then in the land," appears. When Abram first arrived in Canaan, he observed that the land was already inhabited by the Canaanites, meaning he could not immediately take possession of it. Critics suggest that the phrase, "the Canaanites were then in the land," implies it was written at a time when they had already disappeared. However, does the Bible support the conclusion that the Canaanites were completely expelled? Consider 1 Kings chapter 9 verse 20 to 21. As for all the people who were left of the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, during Solomon's reign, the Canaanites were still present and were even used as forced laborers in the construction of the temple. From this, we can conclude that since the Canaanites remained in the land for centuries, the phrase, "the Canaanites were then in the land," does not necessarily indicate a later authorship of Genesis. "The Canaanites were then in the land" only provides the information that when Abram first arrived in Canaan, he found the land already inhabited by the Canaanites, preventing him from taking immediate possession. This expression does not serve as evidence that the text was written long after Moses' time, nor does it undermine his authorship. For more arguments of Abraham ibn Ezra, see my video.